Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
And welcome back to this week's No Limits Mitch Rap podcast. What's happening this week, Mike?
Not much, man. I just wish that you were with me for this incredible conversation we had with a special guest today. I missed you.
I know. I was super bummed I couldn't make this, but it's what happens when you have a pregnant wife. Sometimes podcast comes second.
Wait, podcast comes first, second, third, fourth, wife, fifth now with the 4 kids and the wife. I guess I'm fifth, right?
Depends on the day. Depends on the day.
All right, I'll let you put your sister on the list. All right.
I was going to move you up, depending on the day, like above my kids, depending on how annoying they were. So that's what I was saying.
Oh, okay. I might get into that 3-4 spot.
Yeah, there you go.
Mary's the queen. I can't take the spot from Mary. I'm sure she's the queen of the house.
Oh, yeah. She just like, anyways, yeah.
She's too adorable.
She can say anything. You know, she does something. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. And it's just so cute. You can't like, anyways. You know, I was super bummed. Couldn't be there for it. But, you know, you guys are in for a real treat. Real treat.
I haven't felt this jazzed about our author series. I mean, we've had some great people. And just last week, what a delight talking with Chris Berman. Hopefully some of you guys are into historical fiction with his work. But Chris Hauty is a heavy hitter, man. A big name in the Thrillerverse lately.
Yes. And, you know, I want more. Is the second one out?
Yeah.
Or is it
Deep
coming
State
out?
Was the first, then Savage Road.
Yeah.
And the novella
Savage
was this kind of third one. And the fourth one, Storm Rising, is May. Coming out in May.
Okay. All right. I gotta read Savage Road.
Yeah,
then.
you didn't read
Okay.
Savage Road. Yep.
Yeah.
You got to catch up on that, man.
All right. Oh, I got too much stuff to catch up on, but no, he's a really good author. Seems like a really good dude. So yeah, you guys are in for a treat with this interview.
Quick warning here. We do use the last maybe 10 minutes or so for a spoiler-filled discussion, but we're very clear on when that begins. So even if you haven't read any of the Hayley Chill series, first off, what the hell are you doing? You got to get on that. But we're very clear when we switch it over about 45 minutes in to a little bit of a spoiler discussion. We'll give you a warning, so feel free to jump into the interview. Whether you've met Hayley or not, you're going to love her. Today we welcome the mastermind behind the groundbreaking Hayley Chill series, including Deep State, Savage Road, Insurrection Day, the newest installation, and the very soon-to-be-released Storm Rising. Welcome, Chris Hauty.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. If you don't mind, I'm going to start with a small little anecdote, and I must say thank you. I don't know if you remember January of last year. You did a huge favor for my family. I don't know if you understand how important it was, but in January, I had visited my parents, and I gave my dad a copy of Deep State. Before he got to read it, he was hospitalized with COVID. When he was in the hospital, nobody can visit him. My mother couldn't see him. He asked for one thing. He wanted her to drop, 2 things. He wanted her to drop off 2 things: his phone charger and his copy of Deep State.
Well, he got his priorities straight. Let's say that much.
No, but for real, he read it through his 2-week hospital stay. Things were not looking good for a while, but he texted me every day where he was at, what chapter he was up to. It was like our lifeline with each other because nobody could visit, but he made sure to text every day how far he got in the book. So I want to say thank you.
I do recall that, and I remember your response, and it was, I get asked to do things at times, but I do remember that, and I didn't put today with that request a year ago, but it was very cool to get that request and hear his response, and so I'd like to thank you for giving me that opportunity to help him through his hospital stay. It's a great story.
Yeah, and you were so kind to send him a signed copy of Savage Road when it came out a short while later. So
yeah,
thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, let's kick it off with that book I mentioned, Deep State. came out in early 2020 and it lit up social media. I mean, it was everywhere. People couldn't stop posting about that twist, that it's one of the best debut thrillers ever. How did it feel having your first book so well received?
Well, it was a real whirlwind, and it might seem from the outside like it was practically an overnight success because it was my first novel, and it didn't take very long. It was accepted by Emily Bessler with the first submission, and so it seemed from the outside that it was very easy and happened so fast. But in reality, I think it's probably the same with all authors. There was a lot before that that paved the way for all of that to happen. And so I think you probably know, and maybe some of your audience already knows, that I spent 30 years in Hollywood writing movies and really had no connection with the novel business at all. And so what was so great about the reaction to that book was that it was completely unlike anything I had experienced in the movie business, on several different levels. That book was totally mine. There wasn't a team of development executives and producers and directors and actors interpreting my work. It was really pretty much the book that I delivered to Emily Bessler, and then what I considered, after my experience in Hollywood, to be very light editorial suggestions. And then it was out there in the wild. And I to this day, I remember the first time I checked Goodreads, and the very first true fan, someone who had absolutely no connection to the publishing business or to my career or anything, just someone who got the book. I think it was a librarian somewhere in the Midwest or Colorado who wrote a positive response on Goodreads, my first one. And it was just so exciting. And so as that built and people really responded so favorably to the book, it was just extremely gratifying to have that response and really feel true ownership with the book that I could never, that essentially no one, I don't care who you are, but especially as a writer in Hollywood, in Hollywood, you can't achieve that kind of true authorship because making a movie or a TV series is so much a collaboration. So it was just, I was just grinning from ear to ear for months on end. And then I had to write the second book.
You got to keep going, right? The grind never stops.
Yeah. One of the illuminating moments as we submitted the book to Emily was when my agent checked in with her after she'd had it for a few days. We had put something of a clock on the submission. It was an exclusive submission to Emily, and my agent reported back to me very excited that Emily was loving the book, and her last question was, "What does he have in mind for the next book?"
Yep.
And I had no idea that there was a next book at the time. I just, saw it as a book that I wanted to write. I didn't know there would be more. Literally, I didn't know at the time there would be more Hayley Chill books.
There has to be. There had to be, and there still needs to be.
Yeah. No, well, midway through writing that book, I decided that I had found a new career, honestly. Whether it achieved success or not, I was having so much more fun writing a novel than I ever did writing a screenplay.
Some authors we talk to, they have a vision. This could be that 15-book series, and, they execute the plan. Or Jack Carr told us he's thinking 2 books ahead, knowing where the story's going to progress. And then we hear from others who are flying by the seat of their pants, and who knows what the next one will behold. But, the author's craft, it comes to them, and they put it on page, and it works.
Yeah. Interestingly, I know that that's always a question in book events is whether or not I'm a outliner or a pantser, I think they call it.
Pantser or plotter. Yep.
And I am very much an outliner. I am like, I outline everything. I always have as a screenwriter. You really have to. But I don't know anyone who writes screenplays without an outline or a treatment first. I never thought of that as the overview of the entire series. I start to think about the next book and what the sort of general idea of it will be as I'm winding down the book before it. So right now I'm closing in on the finish of a rough draft for book 4, and I've just started kind of thinking about locations and situations and what sort of book, what sort of structure it might take. So I don't have Jack's foresight in terms of thinking 4 books ahead. That's another kind of chess playing that I can't do. It's a Vulcan style playing chess.
Hey, going back to your screenwriting days, I just realized, I forget if it was Insurrection Day or Savage Road, but I paused it 1 minute and I said, the sentences are so short and crisp and declarative that when it paints a picture of a scenario, I almost feel like I'm watching it. Where sometimes descriptive language does that, but the descriptive language gets a little too fluffy. It almost ends up being distracting. Where your books, I feel like your screenplay writing comes through in the way the sentences are straightforward, as if I were watching this play unfold. This person does this character does this, the setting looks like this. And I realized it actually painted a very clear picture of what was going on. Is that something you're conscious of, if your writing style from screenwriting has bled into the novel writing? Are you aware of that? Are you consciously doing it? Because I really noticed that in just the last book or 2.
Oh yeah, very, very much so. I think it comes from 2 places, and the first place is the one that you're describing. As a screenwriter, I don't know how many screenplays I wrote, but it was a lot. And as I've said many times before, the hidden secret of Hollywood is that no one in Hollywood wants to read, period. And so you really, as a screenwriter, you're absolutely compelled to write with language that has a spareness, an impact, and vividness that will convince them to read past 10 pages. And so, I mean, that's just the kind of writing, prose writing and dialogue writing that I, grew up with and developed, and I think appreciate. I mean, I think it comes from, my earliest admiration and imitations of Ernest Hemingway. I mean, I loved that style of prose, and I became, impatient with other great masters of literature, like Faulkner, where the sentences pile into each other and you can spend whole pages on a description of a magnolia tree or whatever.
Right.
So, I'm very much the kind of reader who reads for character and plot and less for atmosphere and descriptions and details and just lots of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with plot and character. Right. So, I read, I love Cormac McCarthy and that kind of language that is spare like that, but also I think can be evocative of the world and the characters in the story that you're telling. It's just what I gravitate towards. And I do think everyone's attention is getting compromised by, everything from tweets to Instagram to, it's just difficult to hold on to people's attention. They don't have a lot of time. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of information and data that's being dumped on us every second of the day. So, I just think that I write them like I like to read them, I guess, essentially.
Right.
It's the kind of book I would naturally gravitate towards, and that's what I have to do. It doesn't serve me to try and fake it with
Right.
a lot of detail that, I might be able to find on the internet and throw at the reader just to fill the page. And it also brings up another issue about, my background and where I come from. I don't have the kind of background that many authors in the genre have they've experienced a lot of these situations and technical details that they can populate their books with. So I just come at it at a totally different angle and try and create a very readable book, passages, descriptions that still convey a lot of information, but I think just more succinctly and more sparely.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's such a keen observation, because I'm thinking how you fly through your books. You rip through a story, you can't put it down. And part of that's because of the language is so bare. You need more of the characters and of the plot instead of being bogged down by too much description or this overflowing and flowery language. It's like the play's being performed in front of you and you don't feel like you sat there for 3 hours. And then when the curtain goes down, you're like, wait, I want more of this.
Yeah, I very much, I do think when I'm, it's different. My screenwriting is different. And there are several reasons why I love writing books more than I did as a screenwriter. There are more limitations in screenwriting, what you can do and what you can't do. But I think as I'm, especially in sort of the structure, how I lay out passages and chapters and sequences, I think I am really seeing them kind of as a movie. I'm switching from scene to scene and cutting some scenes off short, picking them up later. I think I'm developing those ideas more and more with each book. I think each book is getting better, honestly. I hope they are. I hope people think that.
Oh yeah. That's why I can't wait for Storm Rising.
Yeah, I'd love to get that one out to you guys.
They're also maybe getting, I don't think controversial is the right word for it, but
they might be getting more controversial.
Right.
It's okay, Mike.
Yeah, maybe it is the right word, because I'm thinking you're starting with the deep state I guess that came out towards the end of the Trump administration or towards the transition year.
Well, it came out in January 20.
That's right. So around the election, probably.
Right around the election.
I mean, just the title evokes so much in our current political climate. And then the ideas of, we don't want to spoil too much for our readers. You have to pick up the book. But this idea of foreign interference in our political process, or a shadow group that can pull strings, in our government behind the scenes, eerily present in the background. You're putting forth these ideas in a world where, sure, it's fiction, but some things might not be far off from reality.
Well, it's a big topic. And so I'll say a few things. I want to write books for everybody. So I think maybe controversial isn't exactly the right word, as opposed to topical and touching on current affairs.
Prescient.
And so, my awareness of the genre, such as it was when I started this, it told me that, it seemed like there was a lot of concentration on villains from overseas doing bad things to Americans. And so I wanted to try and do something different, just because that's the best way to find success as any kind of artist or writer, is to do things a little differently. You don't want to go too far off the reservation, but you try and bring a fresh perspective to something familiar. And so, as I developed the series, I think right from the get-go, I decided with the second book, with Savage Road, that I wanted to continue this idea of examining our institutions, American institutions, and the actors within the country who either have or don't have the country's best interests at heart. And so, whereas there may be foreign players, it would be weird to ignore completely, a Russian element or a Chinese element or Islamic element. I'm trying to keep things focused on this country and the problems that we kind of make for ourselves. That being said, you will not find the words. Here are 4 words you will never find in a Hayley Chill book: Republican, Democrat, conservative, progressive. They don't exist. And that's very much by design, because that stuff doesn't interest me, and I think it stops a reader from engaging. And one of the things I'm very, very satisfied about the job that I've done so far with the series is that, as evidenced by the people who follow me on Twitter, they come from all either end of the political spectrum or right in the middle. And that's very gratifying, because that's what I'm trying to address with these books is we have problems here at home. I can't ignore them. I can't write a book about an Islamic terrorist running around Manhattan with a suitcase bomb when all this other stuff is going on in our country that, knock on wood, but seem to be a cause for greater concern. So I'm not pointing fingers at any particular group or political persuasion in my books, but I'm just looking at the way, our institutions are under threat, either from within or without. Does that make sense?
Sure. And I think you bravely and boldly confront that just by writing something like Insurrection Day.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing where this idea came from? Because absolutely genius to take such an incendiary current event that 330 million Americans will have a opinion on. What kind of opinion? We don't know, but they'll have an opinion on that day. To drop your main character into January 6th, there's no one I'd rather have on the ground at the Capitol in that moment than Hayley Chill. Well, maybe Mitch Rapp, but second, Hayley Chill's up there.
Well, it's a fascinating time we live in, Mike. But the way that came about was my agent recommended that I consider writing a novella to bridge the time between the release of Savage Road in January of 21 and the release of Storm Rising in May of 22. The publisher decided to create an extra 6 months of time between those books, just to kind of take advantage of the summer sales. That's when a lot of, and I was excited about that, and the idea of writing a novella, which I hadn't tried to do before. The problem was I had no idea what to write, because the first 3 books, while they can be enjoyed certainly out of order, well, they're best enjoyed in order, but you can pick up any book and read it, and I think get a lot of entertainment out of it. But there is a progression in the books, and I had already written book 3. I had already written Storm Rising when my agent suggested I do that, and so I knew. But Insurrection Day was going to be coming out before Storm Rising, so it had to fit in the chronology between the 2 books, in my opinion, between Savage Road and Storm Rising. And so, and as you know, you've read Savage Road, correct?
Yes.
So Savage Road ends in a fairly dramatic fashion with a massive twist. And so I really was kind of at a loss as what to write about. I thought about just kind of doing something somewhat random, like she's driving down the highway, she stops at a truck stop and something happens, and we get to see Hayley Chill kick ass. And that's probably what I would have done, except then January 6th happened. And I was mesmerized. I mean, honestly, I think January 6th was as impactful and shocking as anything in America since 9/11. I'm not going to get into a debate about which was more significant or impactful because, like you said, there are 300 million Americans, 150 million of which would probably disagree with me. But I don't think anyone's going to doubt that it was a shocking event in our country's history. And I saw a photograph of 2 female interns, congressional interns, carrying the box of the ballots, the electoral ballots, through the rotunda. And at the time, all our friends on the internet suggested that that was indeed the 2 congressional interns who were, quote unquote, saving the ballots from the rioters. And when seeing those young women, it immediately made me think about Hayley Chill, and I had the brainstorm idea of putting Hayley Chill in that situation, in that day. The problem being, like I said, I don't write about Republicans or Democrats or Trump or Biden or anyone real like that. And so, my solution, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the rioters in Insurrection Day are a very large rally of white supremacists who have gathered on the mall to voice their opinions. And, that's a situation where if I lose the white supremacist audience, that's okay with me.
Right. Yes. Good thing for the genre too.
So I'm always walking that line, Mike, between, what's relevant and what's entertainment,
Right.
and I think that, it's a delicate line to walk, in Insurrection Day, and you haven't read Storm Rising, but it very much, is the razor's edge that I'm walking in Storm Rising, which is a very dark book. And I think it's my favorite one that I've written so far. It's very emotional. It's very dark. It touches on some true controversial aspects that I think some readers might have trouble with, but if they stick with the book, I think those potential controversies are resolved in such a way that I don't think anyone should have a problem with. But I'm definitely pushing the envelope, because that's what I think my job is to do. It's to make it, I'm not just going to it's not just a book that you're going to read on your flight from LA to New York.
Right.
It's not just pure escapist entertainment. I'm
Right.
trying to make, certain light bulbs go off in your head and push certain buttons and give you a real emotional ride. And I think Storm Rising definitely fulfills that mandate that I've been trying to pull off.
That's refreshing to hear. I'm not going to name names. I do pick up some books because I'm so invested in the series. I have to get the next one. Yeah. And it ends up being a beach read, a summer read, where we really wanted to do this podcast about Vince Flynn because we think his work, if you look at the whole series, is doing something deeper. It's pushing the envelope, like you said, but it's also taking this one character and not just regurgitating, oh, more kick-ass action, more terrorists for him to beat up. The arc of Mitch Rapp is deeper and more emotional and visceral, the things that happen to him and how he's coping with them, and the relationships with his team, his boss, his friends. So I'm glad to hear you're invested in putting Hayley through that. And with Savage Road, again, don't want to say much. It takes a very personal twist in that story. That's definitely going to be foundational on her future decisions and how she pursues her mission with the organization she's a part of.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it's gonna push the envelope a little bit, take us into maybe those dark spaces of Hayley Chill's life and personality.
Yeah. Well, in book 4, the one I'm working on now, like I said, I'm getting close to the end of the first draft, but I felt like, both Hayley and I had to like kind of take a beat. I mean, we were both kind of an emotional wreck at the end of Storm Rising. So
okay,
it is, I decided with that one it doesn't go to the same, it doesn't, I write visceral books, so it's a bit hardcore and it's quite diabolical in its concept, and it'll definitely freak some people out. But I feel like I was reacting to all the craziness that was happening in the world in the past 2 years, and it really came out in book 3. And, like, I feel like both Hayley and I went to some dark places, and she loses, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's loss in that book. Mm-hmm. And so when we see her in book 4, I see book 4 as kind of like recovery, honestly. Huh. Literally, both literally and figuratively is a kind of a recovery. She's got to find her center again because she gets the living shit kicked out of her in Storm Rising.
I hope this isn't your and her Joker moment, here.
No, not at all. No, not at all. She doesn't. I like arcs in my character. So, she ends book 3 in a very hard place, and I can't really go into much more because I start to give too much away, but we pick her up at book 4 and she's still in that hard place. That's what I really love about, I guess in terms of what Jack Carr's talking about in terms of, thinking 4 books ahead. I do, I'm really settling into this idea of a long road, a long ride to watch her character grow. And, I intentionally, when I realized what the score was with this, ideally these books last for however many books in a series, even beyond their authors, time on Earth. I have a long runway to work with here. She's 24, I think, in the first book. So, and there's a lot that happens, as there's a lot that happens with people from their mid-20s into their 30s, and it's super cool to be able to have that, that ability to paint that broad, potentially epic picture.
Right. Hey, I love hearing all this about what's to come for Hayley. I just had to bring up one other point. We touched on it earlier, how you craft a setting and your locations. So just today, I almost went down the Hayley Chill path on my drive home. I crossed the Key Bridge, which in Deep State, something major happens. I drove past the GW Deli. When we were in that bathroom, that's all I'm going to say, in the GW Deli, I nearly lost my mind because I've been there so many times. And I kid you not, on the same trip, I drive past the bus stop outside the Russian embassy.
That's insane.
I almost have chills every day when I drive past that bus stop. I almost see a silhouette of Hayley sitting there, and I'm not going to say what happens, but
I love that.
Your locations are fantastic, the way you describe it. Have you lived in DC, or you must have spent some time here?
I have, but it's been a long time. It's been a while, and you know, I learned something just a couple of days ago in reference to this topic, and that's that. I've been reading a lot about Lee Child and the Reacher series, and I'm not surprised by this fact, but I read something to the effect that Lee had never been to Georgia when he wrote the first book, and so look, as a screenwriter, you gotta put the material out, and the money really doesn't start flowing until a movie goes into production, and very few. I mean, not too many projects start in production. It usually starts with either a spec script or a development deal. And in those cases, money is limited. So you write a screenplay that's set in Bulgaria or Kentucky or the tip of South America, you're not going down there to research. You don't have the time and you don't have the money. So you just learn how to fake it really good. I don't know if that's something I should admit, but now that Mr. Child has, and he's done pretty well with his venture, I feel a bit more at ease admitting as much. So, it's a combination of, again, I think having a sense of what details to put in. Don't put in too many details, but just, I think not even a question of finding the authenticity, the verisimilitude of the GW deli, but I know I have a problem. I need to get these two characters kicking each other's ass. Okay, where am I going to do that? And I look on Google Maps and I find in the right location, the right distance, the right amount of time for her to give chase, and then if I'm lucky, I'll find a website for that particular business. It really comes into play in Insurrection Day. I've forgotten the name of the restaurant where she chases. She's on the chase, and he's gone through I think it's a Peruvian fusion restaurant, if I kept it in there. And then there's a back entrance, and it goes into a sort of a courtyard, and it leads into another business that takes him into another building that leads him to the next block over. So it's just a way of, for people who know the area like yourself and drive by it and will be entertained, amused, tickled that the location actually exists in a book that they're reading. But also, it's just a way of sparking ideas. Like, how am I going to structure the scene? Well, here are the buildings. Here's, putting yourself in the real situation. What would I do if I'm a bad guy and there are a million cops around? I'm going to duck into this building. Is there a back exit? How am I going to get through there? Et cetera, et cetera. Right. So that's fun stuff. That's a lot of fun to create the scenes in those worlds.
That even works when it's also when it doesn't have a specific name, because a parking garage. We've all seen them. We've all been in them. We've all been scared about who's hiding behind the pillar. So even something that's generic, you could still have as a really gripping setting without a particular on this block at P Street and 13th. You still know, a parking garage, like, a bathroom deli, a deli or a bathroom in the back of a deli. So,
yeah. If you spend any time in New York I was a bike messenger in New York, my first job out of college. And so, yes, I know all about those dingy, crappy little bathrooms in the back of delis and restaurants and learning stones. Yeah.
And I'm a teacher, so when you said really fake it till you make it, I know all about that as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Reacher and Lee Child. I've got to ask you, you saw how that blew up just this last week or so with their debut on Amazon. We've got The Gray Man coming up on Netflix. We've got The Terminalist in production. One, which of those are you most looking forward to? And any thought down the road to seeing Hayley on the big screen? I could see it now, just a show called Chill.
Yeah, well, that's my title for it. I guess that's an easy one to reach for. In regards to those other shows, those are, I love all of those authors and their books, so I just can't wait to see them. I think, I watched the first episode of Reacher last night and just thought it was fantastic. And just, it's like comfort food, that show. It just goes down so easy. And, both of the, packages for Mark's series and Jack's, I mean, the people involved, you want to see those type of actors and directors and producers. Those are just the top talents in the business. So I have every reason to expect that they're going to be fantastic as well. In terms of my series, we optioned it to 20th Century TV even before the book was published. And that option lasted a couple years. We made, in typical fashion, we didn't, it was problematic. Let me just say that. It was problematic. I had two different partners, creative partners on that project. And I would say the second go round with my second partner definitely was much more in the wheelhouse of something that seemed like a good interpretation of the series to me. Unfortunately, it was right. It was probably about a year ago, and it was right in the throes of COVID, and the town had, we didn't even pitch by Zoom because people got so sick in town of pitching by Zoom that we just wrote up a proposal and sent it out to networks that way and didn't get any bites. So we're just now getting going again. And I'm working with a couple reps to take the book out. We're actually going out with book 3, Storm Rising, as sort of a lead-in, because I think it is really topical, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, exciting to get that going. But having been in the business so long, and really appreciating what's going on with the books and this community of authors and fans and bloggers and podcasters, if it never happens, I'm not going to be upset. It's being able to write the books and get them to fans, for me, is enough. And everything beyond that is like, a cherry on top of the sundae. I won't say no, but it doesn't have to happen. It's not why I'm doing this.
Right. Well, you're in such a unique position, kind of straddling both worlds, the screen and Hollywood stuff, and now the books and the novels. So
yeah,
if it's in the cards for anybody, I could see it down the road panning out.
Yeah. And if we got lucky with it, I would, I think I have the whatever you want to call it, the capacity or the track record or the history to be able to, create the thing, which I don't think probably a lot of the other authors in the genre would be in the position to do that. Though they can get an executive producer credit and they'll be consulted and all of that. But I would definitely, I think, take the position that I would want to create the show.
Well, back to books for a second. I got to ask, what are you reading? What's on the nightstand right now?
Oh, I'm reading the Damascus Station.
Yes.
David McCluskey's.
McCluskey, yes.
Yeah, which I'm loving. It's fantastic. And then, really, really good. I like his writing a lot. I can't believe it's a first book. It's like when I read Connor Sullivan's The Sleeping Bear.
Yeah.
Once again, it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this kid just wrote this as the first book. So those were two favorites. I'm in the middle of Damascus, and then after that, I'm going to read Nick Petrie's The Runaway, which
Nice.
I really love Nick's writing, so I'm looking forward to that.
Love that. I feel like you kicked off a wave of some debut authors, their first book coming out of the gates screaming. We had a gap where I wasn't getting great debuts. I picked up a few first books of some authors, wasn't wowed. Ever since Deep State, I feel like every other author I've read just, I don't know if they knew their debut had to knock it out of the park or just the game, just
I raised the bar, man.
Everyone raised the bar. Exactly. Yeah. If you'd be so kind, we want to keep you on another maybe 5-10 minutes or so to ask you some after hours spoiler questions.
Sure.
So we're going to give a spoiler warning here. Pause the podcast, take a break, pick up all the Hayley Chill books, pre-order Storm Rising for this May. And again, spoiler warning, if you have not read Deep State, Savage Road, and Insurrection Day, now's the time to hit pause and sign off. But if you want to hear from Chris, talk a little bit about the storylines and the characters with some spoilers, here we go.
It's a great idea because it's so hard to talk about my books without a spoiler alert. So, yeah.
Yeah, we realized two things about our podcast we've really enjoyed. One is actually reading the book and having a book club discussion as if we're just two friends talking about it, reading it like we would if we hang out, after having read it. But then the other part we've really enjoyed is when an author talks to us, off the cuff, just last 5-10 minutes before we sign off, and we can actually ask them the questions we've wanted to ask. So we thought, let's try to work that in at the end of some of our interviews. So
that's good.
I got to start with Publius. Just what a creation. This organization, the Deeper State. I love this idea. Where'd it come from? And how'd you come up with this idea of, Andrew Wilde and what he's doing?
Yeah. Gosh, I don't remember the genesis of it, except that what the title came to me first, just because at the time when I wrote it, Deep State was still a relatively, it wasn't an esoteric concept, but it hadn't gained the currency. It hadn't become the whipping post of like both parties by that.
Right.
It was still kind of like, ooh, Deep State. It was like, like a phrase like heavy metal or heavy, like just one of those weird like concepts that really grabbed me. Like, ooh, a government within the government sounds cool. And then I kind of built the whole, the story around it. But I can't remember how I came up with it, except I needed Hayley, obviously, to be revealed as something more than she purported to be. She was more than an intern. And, I'm an optimist. I write this dark stuff and all these terrible things happen in our country, but they're in response to the awful and terrible things that are happening in my country. But I always think that things are going to work out. That I still to this day feel this way, even though we have so much polarization. I feel like America will always find its center, because I think, generally speaking, the overwhelming center of our population are good people who have good values and that are very similar to everyone else's values. And so, since I'm an optimist, I needed the good version of the Deep State, the Deep State being a bad thing. It just seemed like a cool idea, and I'm sure it just popped in my head in the way that, 75% of my ideas do, where it's just kind of like, wait a minute, Eureka, where, it's like, yeah, there's a deep state, and then there's something good. There's a deeper state. The name, I can't remember, I sort of dug around looking for a possible name, and there's this connection in the books to the founding fathers, right. and I found out that there was this
Federalist Papers.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, to have that kind of connective tissue to
right.
what we all think to be as the pure, the idealistic founding fathers.
Right.
And that would connect her with that.
Yeah, and then every time you introduce it, I guess to catch up, new readers who this might be their first book, you mention how it's this shadow group with former presidents, Supreme Court justices, directors of national intelligence. Chris and I on the podcast early on watched a documentary, The Spy Masters, where they interviewed all the persons who served as director of national intelligence. So many of them are still alive, still in an age, either retirement age, but still have the ability to serve on boards or organizations.
Yeah.
That collective group has a lot of power,
Yeah.
even if they're right now unelected or not working in the bureaucracy or as civil servants.
They have knowledge and they have wisdom and they have all that wealth of experience. So that's exactly what the deeper state, what Publius is supposed to represent, is the reason why they act so altruistically is because they don't have anything there's no power to preserve. They don't, the problem with supposedly with the deep state, people, the unelected officials, they're just trying to preserve their power because power is more seductive and valuable than money or anything else. So I thought that was the beauty of the concept, is that you could not really question their motivations because they have the only thing at stake for them is the preservation of our country.
Right.
Right. And it's just fun to kind of create those kind of cutout characters who, might speak like an Obama or George Bush or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or whomever, and let people kind of like go, oh, that's the George Bush character right there,
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if they just give speeches because obviously the speaker fee and honorarium is going to be pretty good, or they just write the book because that's going to be a big book deal. But I also think they want to tell the story of the America they fought for and use that influence to tell generations that they can still fight for that too. Yeah. Even if the current establishment or leaders you agree, disagree with, I think they're using their influence in a different way. And sometimes it'd be kind of cool to see that they are hands-on and have people like a Hayley underneath them that they can send out or direct towards a certain objective.
Yeah, I see where along the line, I think probably before I started book 3, either another author or a rep, someone said like, oh, maybe in this book 3, it turns out the deeper state is up to no good. It's up to Hayley to. And I was like, absolutely no way. I want to preserve the purity of that creation and that agency, and just, my idea is like it's like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. I want the deeper state
to exist. We need them. Yeah.
So I'll never say never, but I don't foresee at any time casting the deeper state or Hayley's superiors as potential villains or up to no good.
I don't want to overstep my bounds, but this Andrew Wilde, he's kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure how much I'm supposed to like him.
Right.
Or did you just do such a good job putting me in Hayley's shoes? Because she questions sometimes herself. Yeah. So I do wonder if you are asking the reader, shouldn't we too be worried about people of this level of influence?
Yeah.
Who wield extraordinary amounts of, like you said, knowledge, and I would say in somewhat power as well, because they do have agents like Hayley and her friend and the other people on the ground. They do have power in that sense. Is Andrew Wilde a good guy? I mean, don't answer that directly, but I do sometimes like Hayley wonder. He's come to her rescue. He has, I don't know. Is the cat out of the bag there?
I'm kind of holding him a bit in reserve. I mean, his role has not changed much. It fluctuates between being this kind of abrupt, not terribly friendly presence in her life, and he plays the role almost of like a true supervisor. he's not the boss, and the way that I've painted those true, the top level deeper state personalities, they're always, in each book so far, they're above reproach. But Andrew Wilde, is that classic supervisor. He's not that untouchable, unassailable force. He's the guy who's carrying out orders and being kind of a pain in the ass supervisor that I'm sure all of us have had at one point in our employment. But I have been kind of keeping him in reserve for a bigger role and to do more with his character in terms of all this, musings that you're having about his real character. Book 4 takes place, I'm not going to say where it takes place, because it's definitely in an unusual location for Hayley in one of these books. I wanted to do something, like I said, I needed a break from book 3. And so it's a very unlikely place that you would think on the surface is very pleasant, and it turns out there's some very unpleasant things happening there. But all that said, I think for book 5, I think I'm going to go back to DC and probably do something more with Andrew Wilde in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. That might be down the road.
Yeah, that's down the road.
I guess one more question about Hayley and what she's been through. You brought her father in to the picture, and she went through some pretty shocking revelations about his time in the service and, his death in the line of duty, which, kind of rug pulled us. But you really tackled, I think, mental health there a little bit and dealing with the fallout of war when, you're a victim of your own side, and abuses of the system. Did you intentionally want to put her in the shoes of what a lot of service people, their families and veterans are experiencing? Is that somewhat what you were going for with that storyline?
Oh yeah, and the storyline really completes itself in book 3. I mean, so we're in the zone of spoiler alert. So can we assume that your listeners have read Savage Road?
Guys, we did say spoilers for Deep State and Savage Road and Insurrection Day, so yeah. It's coming.
If you haven't read Savage Road, then please hit your pause button, close your laptop, or however you're listening. But yeah, I mean, her dad plays such an enormous role in her life, and is such a sort of like Gary Cooper-esque type of figure. And then as we learn more and more about him, and certainly by the end of Savage Road, we learn how damaged he was by his experiences in war and potentially involved in some really, heinous activities. So, yeah, I mean, it seemed to fit the canon for her to have that experience and relationship in her life, and then it'll play out and resolve in book 3, like I said. But yeah, I didn't serve in the military. My dad did, but I have such respect for the men and women who do serve and the experiences that they have and the traumas that they incur. So it felt like if you're going to have a character who had more experiences, you can't gloss over that stuff. So,
right.
And like I said, it seemed to, Hayley has something of a tortured persona, and it seemed to fit her character.
Right. Hey, well, one way you put your stamp on the Thrillerverse is with these flash forwards of the characters. I mean, just what a brilliant move, because Vince Flynn, we always bring up, was the master of the backstory. He could show you what a character represents or stands for by fleshing out where they came from. But you kind of flip that on its head. These little death stories or vignettes of where the character's life will end up. And I notice you only do it for like secondary characters. That way we don't know the main characters, what happens to them. I love that. It's almost invoking like karma, or what goes around comes around for some of them. It's somewhat clairvoyant. We could see into their future. That is just so different. I feel like we should call that the Hauty. You need a trademark for it.
I haven't seen it anywhere else.
It changes the game, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone has done that or is doing that, and I'm waiting for the first person to kind of copy it. It'll be fun to see that if anyone does. But again, when I was writing the first book, I was completely unfettered. I just had no agenda. I was just trying something new and literally didn't know what the rules were. I just felt like, hell, I've been writing for 3 decades, burdened with rules about what I could and couldn't do. So I was just having fun. And I think it came from, it's emotional when I'm writing these scenes and these characters and these secondary characters who we're not going to see again. I always want to know what's going to happen to them, and so I'm satisfying that urge to know more what happens away from the story when they walk off the stage, but also, as a part of aggrandizing Hayley Chill, like, I'm usually writing that Hauty, whatever you want to call it, from the inflection point of having met and interacted with Hayley in some way. So for better or worse, how does the rest of that character's life track out? And one of my favorite ones is in the first book, and her boxing. I can't remember the character's name. It's in Deep State. It's her trainer. I think he's a sergeant. I can't remember if he was a sergeant or not. But how his life tracked out after Hayley went off and lived her life as a deeper state operative. What happened to that character? Right. And just the fact that he has this long life afterwards, but the last thoughts that he has before he expires, he's murdered in Detroit or someplace, Chicago, and I just thought, like, when I wrote that scene, I was just like, I really felt it, like, yeah, this is cool, and I continue to do it. I haven't done as much in book 4. Book 4. But sometimes I go back and do it in rewriting. It just, I don't want to force it. I don't want to make it kind of like a forced gimmick. If the mood strikes, I do it. It definitely happens in book 3, probably to a less extent than it happened in books 1 and 2. Yeah,
I think I noticed it a little less, but then when you get it, it's a nice little Easter egg. It's a nice treat.
Little Easter egg, yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Hey, well, I have to say thank you for coming on with me tonight, but also for creating these stories for the world. And on a personal level, thank you for what you did for my father with the signed book and sending him a copy and acknowledging how this, I really have to say, saved him. There were some dark days, and the fact that he wanted to tell me which chapter he was up to, every night he made it his mission to give me that report and tell me what Hayley was up to next. And it really meant a lot. So thank you for what you did for him and for us. And thanks for writing these books. And thanks for coming on today.
My one ask, Mike, is that you remind me when come May or, a little bit before May, when I get my box of hard copies of Storm Rising, that you remind me, and I want to send another signed copy to your dad.
Hey, that is just too generous. Thank you. I'll stay in touch.
Yeah, great. And thanks for having me on. It was really fun talking to you tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Sure, thanks for coming. Everybody, pick up your copies of Deep State, Savage Road, Insurrection Day, and pre-order Storm Rising. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you coming on.
All right, man.
We hope you enjoyed that awesome interview that Mike did. What a good guy, Mike. You're just killing it, man. Killing it with these interviews.
Man, it's all these authors. Anytime you reach out to somebody, boom, immediately they're willing to talk to you. They're so open, so personable, and really for the most part easy to communicate with and get this arranged.
You know, we have some names on our list that we need to get on the pod, and one of them is highly relevant to an announcement we will be making on the pod next week. We need to get him on the pod.
Yes.
Just dropping little breadcrumbs here. We have a big announcement for you next week. Our 100th episode. This was episode 99. Our 100th episode. Something big's coming. Not telling you yet, but you gotta listen next week. It's coming.
It's the big 100. We're gonna drop some news. We're going to set you guys up. Our patrons, they already know. A lot of them already heard the special announcement. And guys, get ready. The rest of 2022 into 2023, we've got an awesome season 2 lined up for you of the podcast. So definitely tune in next week. Don't miss the episode. We got a big announcement. We'll drop some news. And we're going to be talking covers.
Yes, we are. Excited to talk the covers in totality. This is going to be a daunting pod.
Whew. We thought doing the first lines was a big one. Now we're doing the covers, and just down the road shortly here, we're going to have to give our final ratings as we wrap things up. So big stuff coming on the podcast the next month or so.
Yeah, I can't wait. This is a fun time. Mike.
Yep.
All right, guys, we need to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Kevin, Daryl, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Subscribe, rate, and review. You can find us at mitrappod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at mitrappod. And as always, just let Mitch be Mitch. Just a disclaimer, this podcast is not affiliated with Vince Flynn, Kyle Mills, or Simon & Schuster, but thank you to them for bringing us the wonderful world of rap. And the music soundtrack is Guerrilla Tactics by Raphael Crooks.